Hello everybody and welcome back. If you are new, welcome to my channel. I'm Kari and today I'm going to be talking about Elizabeth I because I just love her so much and cannot articulate it correctly. Today is her birthday actually. She was born September 7th, 1533 to Anne Boleyn and Henry VIII. Anne Boleyn was Henry's second wife. He created the Church of England to marry Anne Boleyn and then beheaded her in 1536, just shy of Elizabeth's third birthday. So there's your short history lesson for the day, but now let's get into some of my favorite books about Elizabeth. The first one is the one that introduced me to Elizabeth in the first place. It's called Beware Princess Elizabeth by Kari-ng Maier. I don't have it with me in North Dakota, it's back in Colorado, but that book I read when I was, let me think, 7th grade, so about 12 or 13 years old, and we had to do a book report on it. I remember going in to do the book report and we could dress up if we wanted to, and I just fell for Elizabeth so hard because of that book. So I dressed up. My parents had got me this really nice Elizabeth costume, velvet, fake jewels, the whole getup. So I wore that for my book report and I just went all out, but I loved it. And people liked my book report too, which was exciting. So there's that one. It's a middle grade novel, very easy to read now. I think it's maybe 300 pages at most, but it's also part of a quartet. There's one on Catherine of Aragon, Anne Boleyn, and somebody else. I don't remember. I should, but I don't. I'm sorry. But yeah, so there's those four books, which I loved. And then the next one, which I'll say just because I also don't have this one, is Elizabeth I by Margaret George. Margaret George writes a whole bunch of books about different people. She's got one on Helen of Troy, she's got one on Henry VIII, Elizabeth, Mary Queen of Scots, and I've read the last three, Mary Queen of Scots, Henry VIII, and Elizabeth I. I read the Mary Queen of Scots one first, and then I read Elizabeth, and I was a little bit disappointed in the Elizabeth one, just because it started about halfway through her reign, I think about 1588, when the potential Spanish invasion was supposed to happen and didn't because they all got wrecked and burned, and what a nightmare. But I also understood why she started in the middle of Elizabeth's reign. Elizabeth's reign was almost 45 years long. She lived to be almost 70, so it made sense to have to cut it down, as opposed to Mary Queen of Scots, whose reign was maybe 10 years, I think. And then she was imprisoned for close to 20 by Elizabeth. So I did understand it, and it was still a really well-written book. I highly recommend Margaret George. I think she's a great author. I just wanted more because it's Elizabeth. But the next four I have here with me. So without further ado, the first one in hard copy is The Poison Garden by Karen Harper. I knew that a minute ago. By Karen Harper. And this book is a set of 9, over here, set of 9. They're mysteries set in Elizabethan times. This one starts with Elizabeth when she's a princess, so she's about 25 years old. By the end of the book, her sister Mary has died and Elizabeth is queen. And then the next 8 books follow her as she gets older. And it's not so much set in Elizabethan times, which it is, obviously it has to do with Elizabeth, but it's Elizabeth herself solving the mysteries, which is just fantastic. These ones had me on the edges of my seat. I haven't reread them for a couple years, and I really need to, but yeah. Karen Harper is another author that I love. Next up, I haven't talked about this author too much, even though she's absolutely one of my all-time favorites, and it is Ill Met by Moonlight by Mercedes Lackey. Mercedes Lackey is a fantasy author. She's written a whole bunch of books. I don't own half of them, and she takes up 2.5 shelves. But this one is basically the fairies in Henry VIII's time, or Elizabeth's time. It's been a while since I've read this one as well, but I remember loving it. It's Elizabeth as a princess, hence the very young portrait of her here, based on that one famous painting of her in the red dress. And it's just her getting help from the fairies and what she has to do and what they do to keep her alive and get her on the throne, because they want her on the throne. There's several others in this particular series by Mercedes Lackey about Elizabeth and fairies in that time. I just haven't read them, but I'm getting there. The next book is well, this one, Maid of Deception, is technically the second book in this series. The first one is back in Colorado. I'm sorry, but that one's called Maid of Honor. They're by Jennifer McGowan. There we go. And they are about Elizabeth's ladies or maids-in-waiting who have these different talents. The one before this book was the girl could basically parrot back anything. So she didn't have to understand the language, but she could repeat for word the conversation that she'd overheard some Spanish ambassadors talking about. And then Lord Cecil would be able to take that, translate it, and tell whether the Spanish were plotting against Elizabeth, which they seem to pretty consistently have done during her reign. Anyway, yeah, this is a YA novel, historical fiction. I just think it's really fun. It's a mystery sort of setting, and I don't know, I really enjoyed it, but that's just my opinion. And then the last book I'm going to talk about today is a true history, and it is The Sultan and the Queen by Jerry Broughton. This book is, as you might have guessed from the title, about Islam and Queen Elizabeth, and how she sort of completely changed this landscape of England's relationship with Islamic countries or the Middle East, all of the above, during her reign. I had no idea, none whatsoever. I knew she was courted by and sort of vaguely flirted with Ivan the Terrible in Russia during her reign, but I didn't know anything at all about her and Islam. So I read this book, flew through it last semester, I think, probably somewhere around March, and I just loved it. It was refreshingly light after having read case books for, a year and a half. It was just very well written, it flowed well, it made sense, and I learned so much about a topic that I had no idea about, even. So, yeah, this is definitely a fantastic book, and I'm glad I bought it. It was a cover buy. What can I say? But, yeah, so those are all of my books. As far as Elizabeth books go, I love virtually all of them, unless they completely butcher her like Rain did. Oh, that's a different story. But yeah, so all of these books are among my favorites. As far as Elizabeth goes, they're pretty high up there on my general book list as well. Happy 484th birthday, Elizabeth I, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Bye.